Well, hello and welcome back to the A Stroll Through the Library podcast. My name is Matt. I'm the host as always, and I have got someone I am beyond excited to be able to talk with today. We have got Pastor Ian Simkins here with us. He is probably, I'm sure there are many other things that he's well known for, but I've explained to a friend of mine, I was like, the black text on Instagram or black box with white text on Instagram that you see your friends share. That is who we're talking with today. Ian has been somebody who's been a real inspiration to me every time I open the dark place that can be social media. I'm enjoying being able to see the brightness of my day there. So thank you so much for being here with us, Ian. How are you doing today?
I'm great, man. Honestly, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'm honored.
Dude, of course. Yeah. I know I think I saw on Instagram, you guys had like a celebration party and they got you a cake that was the black box, correct?
Yeah.
I ththought that was pretty awesome.
My staff did. My staff, they're the absolute best, man. I had no idea they were doing this. We were just having lunch and they like numbered balloons and had confetti and brought me a plain black square cake. And it was amazing. It was so good.
I love that. No, that's awesome. That is literally, I was like, you guys, I was talking to my wife. I was like, you know who Ian is? And she was like, I was like, this guy showed the black box with white text. She was like, oh yeah. No, I've seen that all the time. Yeah. It's like, hey, so you got something you're known for.
It is
for
funny.
Sure.
Sometimes people will ask me like, hey, do you mind if I borrow your aesthetic? I'm like, I'm just screenshotting Apple Notes. I don't think I own the aesthetic. That's
yeah. You've got to change the settings to dark first in your phone, but otherwise that's it. No, it's great. I really do appreciate all of that. So
thanks,
we're gonna have a conversation about books as we do on this show. And so the first question is one that we'll just jump right into, but it's one that I love to ask because it's usually, not always, but it's usually like the least spiritual answer. It depends. Occasionally it'll be like, oh, the kid's Bible, but like usually there's some other fun ones here. So to kind of ease us into it, when you think back to your first memories of reading, first off, like, were you a reader as a kid? I really wasn't, but
I wasn't either. Nope.
I didn't fall in love until like college age was about the time that I was like, hey, reading doesn't suck for the first time ever. Like, I'll take that. Yeah, exactly. My mom was right. Who knew? But with that being said, when you think back to your earliest memory, what was like the first book that you remember connecting with, enjoying reading, kind of getting into yourself?
I know exactly what it is, and you may have heard of it. It's a little book called Harold and the Purple Crayon.
Oh yeah.
You know this book?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It is so etched in my memory. And I don't want to over spiritualize it, but if you remember, he's got this crayon that creates reality and then he just sort of descends into chaos.
Yep.
I mean little kid chaos. I don't want to make it sound too dystopian, but then there's this beautiful moment and I keep coming back to it, man, especially since having kids, where he like remembers his view from the bed, that he can see the moon through his window. So he draws the moon and draws a window around it. And I for some reason that turn has always just felt like poetry to me. And I just, I've loved that book since I was a kid.
No, that one. And I really enjoyed about the same time was like Where the Wild Things Are, like that genre of kids book. Oh my goodness. Anything Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is incredible, but that was like where, like I said, I didn't enjoy books a whole lot. I did enjoy being read too. I just wanted somebody else to do all the work.
Totally.
But I don't want to read it myself.
I still kind of want that. Is that?
I was going to say Audible.
Come and read to me.
Yeah. They're not sponsored by Audible, but but we're open.
Not yet. Right.
Throw it. Yeah. No, I love it. Yeah, that book is incredible. They made it into a show, and my kids were watching it not too long ago, and that was fun.
It's a full movie. Yeah, my kids and I just watched it too. It was incredible. I don't think my kids cared about it nearly as much as I did. I was really into it, and they're like, whatever, I'm gonna go play Pokemon. But
that is, and I know we don't, not typically talking about movies on here, but I will say Fantastic Mr. Fox, not necessarily a kid's movie for the record, but I love that movie. Right. I showed my kids, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, I don't know. But I showed them and they were like, yeah, this is fine, but like, not enough
Right.
things happening. And I was like, yeah, fair, but you're supposed to love it because I love it, right? Like that's what we're looking for. Just joking.
I'm sure that's going to keep happening. My oldest is only 7, and I
Yep.
like can't wait to show him, like the Sandlot. But I'm sure he's not going to care about it for a long time. And I'm going to want him to be locked in. He's be like, I'm going to play.
Yep. That is, my oldest is 8, and we have that conversation often. So it's yeah, it hurts a little bit, but it's okay. We carry on. We carry on.
We sure do.
So thinking back to childhood, all of that, like what's going on in your life at that point in time? Did you grow up in church? Were you in a Christian family around that time, or was that kind of something that came along later?
Yeah, my parents came to faith when I was real young, maybe even a year before I was born. So my earliest memories have always been a part of a church. My mom is still a part of the same church that they started attending
Wow.
when I was 6 or 7. And
That's
obviously that's gone through a lot of different, iterations
Sure.
and whatnot. But yeah, my parents were always really dialed into that. I was homeschooled for this kind of the second half of school. So we had like, co-op friends and church friends. A lot of the people that I like learned to play music with were church people. So like there's a lot of integration, I think, into my sort of church life there.
For sure. Yeah. No, I was homeschooled as well. And,
Nice.
and probably for better or for worse, I had a guest on not too long ago, and he was like, I would have never guessed you were homeschooled. I was like, thanks. That might be the nicest thing you've ever said to me. But with that being said, we love homeschoolers. Not a bad thing. But yeah, no, similar for me. Grew up reading, I mean, like C.S. Lewis, kind of, you had to, and kind of fell in love with that. Now, C.S. Lewis is definitely one of my favorites, though not so much Narnia as much of the rest of his work. But with that being said, great books. But anyhow, yeah,
man. That's I mean, I know this is your show, but like, what's top of the deck Lewis for you?
So honestly, I've got the weirdest take that you probably could have, because of course, Mere Christianity, top tier.
Yeah,
I love Mere Christianity. I've got like 8,000 copies to hand out behind me. But with that being said, my actual favorite is probably The Pilgrim's Regress.
No kidding.
And it's not necessarily because it's his greatest work, although I really do enjoy it. I just like that it's his first one written as a Christian, recent conversion, kind of working through this. And sure, there's like those tropey, cheesy elements of characters being named for their current life status, which is very Pilgrim's Progress-esque. But man, that book I've come back to so many times. I think I had read plenty of his other work before coming to that, and then I was like, oh my goodness, this is really good. I enjoy that one a lot. So yeah, but I've yet to meet anyone who agrees with that take, and that's okay. That's all right. We're all about yeah, we're okay.
I love it.
So yeah, so thinking through books and kind of like as your life is progressing, one of the things I've found for me was like, as I've kind of grown into reading, really, there's only a handful of books that I personally read over and over and over again. The Bible is obviously, we're working in church. I'm a pastor. And so there's a lot of that kind of is both necessity and sustenance for the Christian life.
For sure.
But past that, there hasn't been a ton. There's been a handful. So do you have any books that you have returned to over and over again that kind of just keep meeting you in new ways as you read them?
Absolutely, man. I mean, speaking of Lewis, Screw Tape Letters is one of those for me.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Part of the reason is because it's so short and I have a short attention span, but the timeliness of this idea, this concept of a veteran demon writing to a novice demon, I find new stuff in those pages all the time. There's another one, man, that I read. Man, this must have been early in ministry. Eugene Peterson's The Pastor is one that I come back. I find myself recommending it a lot, and then whenever I recommend it, I talk about it, and then when I talk about it, I was like, I should go read that chapter again.
You gotta go read it. Yep.
I'm with you. There's so many new wonderful books that I want to read. It's hard for me to justify going back. But every once in a while, there's a few that are that just kind of get lodged in my soul. I'm like, I think I need that chapter again in my life. So I don't tend to reread whole books, but I will certainly go back and like reread like certain chapters that have been particularly meaningful or formative for me.
Absolutely. No, I totally get that. And Eugene, man, that book is one that yeah, every time I've got a friend who's like, "Hey, I think I feel like I'd like to work in ministry. I've got this." I'm like, "You need to read this." Like, I'm not
Totally.
saying no, I'm not saying
Right.
yes. I'm
Right.
saying read this book.
Yeah.
Come back to
Yes.
me. Let's talk.
Yes.
Contemplative Pastor Eugene Peterson, another one
Mm-hmm.
of those that's up there. And I've talked about it before on the show, but Letters to a Young Pastor, between
So
the
good.
one that's between him and his son. Oh my goodness.
So
He's
good,
one of my
man.
favorites for sure. So how, as you think on those books, how would you say your relationships change with them? Like, obviously you're coming back for more of a chapter than the whole book, but are there
Yeah.
different seasons that it's hit you differently, or any of that?
Yeah. I went to Bible college to be a youth pastor.
Yeah.
And then, ministry and life kind of kicked me in the teeth pretty early in a number of different ways. And we don't have to go down that rabbit trail, but there certainly have been things even that I don't think I realized what a gift that undergraduate education was, because they were having us read things like Peterson and Willard and
Yep.
Allen and Foster as a youth pastor. So
Oh yeah.
I didn't realize how good I had it at Judson
Yeah.
University in Elgin, Illinois. And so I've certainly gone back because I was reading it. When you're 19, anything you're reading is kind of theoretical for whatever future
Yep.
ministry you're going to be a part of. And having gone through now a number of seasons, both in ministry, but also life, like getting married and having kids, going back and reading some of these works that I know that I read
Oh
as
yeah.
a 20-year-old guy have way more depth and weight. I wish I had paid more attention, to be honest, when I was 18, 19, 20, because I'm rereading some of these things. And I'm like, this could have saved me a
Yep.
lot of heartache. So,
Yep.
so honestly, that's kind of a sad, or at least a weighty answer. But I think walking through suffering or pain or grief and then going back to the works that formed you, it always adds just like a richness to those words, and I found that particularly with
Absolutely.
Peterson. I think of like
Yep.
Peterson's Long Obedience in the Same Direction.
Mm.
That's the kind of thing that the older that I get, the more I'm like, that's the kind of life that I'm aiming for. In my 20s, everything was about, what's hot, or what hip, or and now I'm like, yeah, this actually is a vision for my life that I'm way more interested in. It all kind of in different ways.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I think very similarly. And also I'm impressed because yeah, that has not been the experience that I've heard. I'm not making fun of
Sure.
youth pastor situation. I was a youth pastor for years, but yeah, I had a friend who went to a large we'll leave it unnamed Christian college, but they had an entire class on games. And that
Yes.
was like, which honestly, to be fair, as a youth pastor, if there was one thing I was terrible at, it was games. I was
Right.
never good at that. I'm sure I have former students listening who could attest, but
Right.
at the end of the day, probably would have been helpful.
Right.
But we definitely, most of my friends were not reading Peterson or anything else really. It's kind of that. Like
Mhm.
Doug Fields, who's great, but that was about the only textbook that I remember. So it doesn't always work
That's
that
right,
way.
100%.
That's cool. But yeah, I think definitely, yeah, I would say very similar in the respect of like, you have kids, and I've preached often, but just the reality of like thinking of God as a father
Mhm.
is one thing until you become a father, and then
I
and then
know.
it doesn't make it any more true or any less.
I know.
But man, does it really change things when I think about like my kid, and my oldest is 8 now, and having to pull him off the stairs constantly because he wants to climb up the steps that he's not ready to go up. And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
man, how many times did God pull me out of
That's
situations that
right.
I wasn't supposed to, or pull me away from the electric plug as I'm going for it? Like
Yeah.
it just hits different when you have that. And I think a lot of that carries over into Lewis and Peterson and Schaefer, all of that. Really, it does. So I think that's
Absolutely.
awesome. So one of the questions that I don't know why it's my favorite, but it's probably my favorite question. It usually gets into some fun answers. But is there ever a book
Hmm.
that you've read that has flipped your perspective on God, on faith, community? Anything for you that's like that?
And there were a few, and they were all kind of in the same era, which I guess maybe that does something. I we try to say to our staff all the time that leaders are learners. We try to
Yep.
really cultivate a posture of learning that we should always be sharpening, and we should lead with curiosity. But man, something about those
Absolutely.
early 20s where you're reading some of these things for the first time, that and a lot of them, maybe this isn't that hot of a take, but like Blue Like Jazz really messed me up a
Yeah.
lot by Donald Miller.
Yep.
That like flipped some stuff for me. I remember reading Shane Claiborne's Irresistible Revolution, and
Oh
that
yeah.
like
Yep.
blew open some categories. Anne Lamott's Traveling Mercies, for whatever
Mm,
reason, like stands in
yep.
my mind as like, oh, that's what good writing
Yeah.
feels like, and reads
Yep.
like. And those are three very different books, but those are certainly ones. Now, to be fair, I was living in India for the summer. I had been kicked out of the house I was supposed to be staying in. That's a whole other
Mm.
story. But I'm like reading Irresistible Revolution, and I'm reading about Mother Teresa while sitting at her gravesite, like in
Oh my
Calcutta.
goodness.
So there's a certain level of like the environment probably elevates in my mind how
Yeah.
impactful some of those books were in that season, but they hold a really special place because those books were giving language for things that I was feeling at the time. And then, like, to give a throwback one, I remember reading Brother Lawrence's The Practice of the Presence of God,
Yeah.
and it just rattled me. His whole notion of the goal of the Christ follower is to be in two places at once, doing the
Yep.
dishes and in the presence of God, gardening and in the presence of God. That was like a paradigm shifting realization for me that I honestly probably still makes its way into my preaching today.
Oh, for sure. That was one that it is probably the book I'm most embarrassed to say I hadn't heard of. I don't know how I made it so long. It was probably, I don't know, 5 years ago. Someone was like, hey, have you ever picked this up? They got it at like Goodwill for
Yeah.
50 cents or something. They're like, I don't know what it is, but check it out. And oh my goodness, that book, incredible. That and Sabbath by Abraham Heschel, one of those books that just like the idea. I struggled so long with like, how do I Sabbath, in part because, working in ministry has its challenges to Sabbath at times. Like it's really easy to fill your schedule, as I know you know.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, wow, just what an organic take on Sabbath and rest and the necessity thereof that culture certainly doesn't push us towards very
That's
often
true.
at all. So
Absolutely.
I'm very grateful for those. Do you remember, was there anything in those books, like what would you say are the things that have kind of like stuck with you? Is there anything in particular that you've carried into ministry? Like you said, Brother Lawrence is still something that probably seeps its way through, but anything similar to that?
Yeah, I think that's the thing about great books, man. Is most of these books, I don't have like a single quote or a verse or a
Sure,
line,
sure.
which even as I'm saying that, I'm realizing how true this is for preaching too. We put
Yep.
such an emphasis on like, oh, I need this one like line to
Yep.
land. When actually it's probably much more like, oh, this is what it's like to walk with a community of people for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So I
Absolutely.
think like with Brother Lawrence, that was one that kind of opened my eyes to the notion of always being in God's presence and not something that sort of
Yeah.
like we bounce in and out of. I think the Blue Light Jazz reference was addressing some of the angst that I was feeling at the time, and it was like, is it C.S. Lewis in The Four Loves when he talks about it, the definition of friendship is
Yep.
when you share and the other person goes, "Wait, you too? I thought I was the only one."
Yes. Yeah, I
That's
believe
what
so.
Blue
Yep.
Light Jazz was for me. He's a
Yep.
much better writer than I am, but I felt like reading it, I was like, oh, I'm not alone for thinking this. It wasn't necessarily a solution, but if I felt slightly less crazy,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
that's a really important companion in ministry, man. Sometimes you can kind of look around and like,
Absolutely.
am I the only one who feels this way? Do I need to just get in
Yes.
line? Am I going nuts? So some
Yep.
of my most favorite books, and that's a lot of what Peterson does. Sometimes Peterson, talking even about the lines that he wasn't willing to cross and his commitment to people in a locale, and I'm just like, yeah, that's how I feel. I feel a little more justified knowing that someone
Yes.
like Peterson also felt that way.
Yes. No, absolutely. Well, Peterson, so I grew up in Maryland. I lived in Utah, pastored out there for almost 6 years, and then we moved a year and a half ago to Kansas. And I'm now a lead pastoring a church here in our denomination. And Peterson was one that, like, growing up near Baltimore and being able to read through some of his personal stuff and go, oh, I know what road he's talking about. But
Wow.
also secondarily, like, and this might not sound great. I don't mean this as a negative thing towards those from Maryland. I love Maryland, but there's a certain element in which like the particular area he was in was a difficult people to love. And that's not to say I don't. That's to say it's
Sure.
just true. Like
Sure.
there's particularities there that don't exist in the rest of the country in some ways. And so, yeah, his dedication to that, I remember like, for me, I walked into, I was working at a mega church, in Utah, great place. Love that church still. But I had this experience. I walked into Walmart one morning to pick up donuts for a Sunday school class of teenagers or something. And this big burly man comes from back behind the butcher's counter in Walmart, deli counter, gave me a huge hug. And he's like, hey, man, I've been praying for your daughter. He's got tears in his eyes. He's working. He's like, I've been praying for your daughter, this, that, and the other thing. And I had this like internal turmoil that I'm not sure has totally left me because I had no idea who he was. I had never met the guy. Our church, not that there's anything wrong with large churches at all, but for me, I was like, man, I can't do this. I don't know that there's anything wrong with it, but I can't continue doing this because I don't know the people that I'm pastoring. For him, I was a pastor when in reality I felt more like a speaker in his life, and that was valuable, but it wasn't the same. And reading Peterson was one of those things where I was like, I kind of do want, for me, again, not prescribing, just describing, kind of want a smaller community where I can do that, shepherd faithfully for the next 30, 40 years, whatever, as long as God's got for me. Not so much that. And there's something in there that I think not only is countercultural, but it's also like really important. And I think there's a lot of those moments that I've struggled with in the past couple of years that I'm glad to be on the other side of now. But God is good in the midst of all of that.
That's
right. For sure.
Yes, sir.
So a couple questions. I'll kind of like not super personal, but more personal stuff. I was saying before we recorded, like one of the things that I love about opening Instagram, seeing a post that you've posted or a reel that's on there, something like that, is just that reality of like the world is kind of crazy. It's a messy place. It always has been. I know there are many who have their takes on it's so much worse now than it was X amount of years ago. I don't know. I wasn't there. But what I do know is it's crazy sometimes. How, I didn't prepare you for this question, so I'm sorry, but how do you find that balance? Like, what are some of the things that you've done in ministry that have allowed you to have kind of a way of walking faithfully in the midst of left-right narrative, craziness, all of that?
Dang. First off, thanks for saying that. No, thanks for saying that. That's super encouraging, man. One of the things that we do every week that has formed me immeasurably is, so we have a teaching team here at the Bridge. So 3 weeks before any sermon is preached, I'm presenting a first draft to a room full of people on our staff, and it's right and left and young and old, men and women, and I invite them to rip it to shreds. And that I'm not gonna lie, can be really painful, especially as you know, if you've crafted something specifically, worked really hard on it. But being in that week in and week out rhythm of inviting people to speak into what it is that I think the Lord wants me to share on a Sunday has helped me better see my blind spots. It's helped me be more winsome, more nuanced. It's also at times helped me to be more courageous when it's like, hey, you might be straddling this too much. I think this is actually a chance for you to lean in pastorally and like that. I'm so eternally grateful for that room. And there's like a core team, but then we also have rotating staff members that come and they weigh in. So most of what I'm posting on Instagram are either like things I'm working on toward a sermon, after a sermon, or things that we're facing as a community. They're all rooted in a locale for me. None of it's in a vacuum. And I think when I think of that team and the diversity and wisdom of the people that are speaking into it, it helps the final writing to reflect the diversity of our community and not just, Ian's vacuumed ivory tower thought. And it just, I'm just so the short answer is community, like inviting honest, faithful, but sometimes like pretty specific community to speak into those things has, I think, really helped a lot.
No, I appreciate that. I know it's something that so I'm part of the Mennonite Brethren denomination, which no one really knows what that is, and that's totally cool. We're like I probably one day I'm going to get in trouble for continuing to say it this way, but we're like the smallest of the Mennonites. And it's a weird I love our denomination. I really do. I've been part of it for years now, but it's a strange place to be because we as Anabaptist Mennonite side of things, kind of apolitical, often really
Mm-hmm.
removed from politics,
Mm-hmm.
historically. But then we had a divide a couple years ago between Mennonite USA, which kind of went a little more left, and Mennonite Brethren, which went a little more right. And so now you have a people who have never defined themselves by political barriers,
Wow.
specifically split over political issues,
Yep.
kind of becomes a weird place to be. And so I know for me, like we've been as a group of pastors, like talking through like how do we protect against the echo chambering of ourselves, which I think that
Mm-hmm.
community aspect is huge. And then also still like feeling, instead of doing what kind of historically has happened in a lot of our spaces, which is like a little less worried about anything going on in the world because we're just outside of that. We're just kind of separatists there. How do we still engage culture? And I think community is probably the answer to that as well. But I appreciate that thought because that's something we're working through a lot, is like, how do you still meet needs while not saying, hey, the sky is falling? Because that's not
Totally.
not necessarily the case.
Totally.
So yeah, I really do appreciate that.
Thanks, man.
So yeah, I think jumping back into some of the book questions that I've got for you, coming back around to that. One of the things that for me was like life changing, and kind of the reason I asked this question is because there were so many of those moments in my life, like you mentioned, where you're kind of thinking, man, someone else felt that way. Like
Yeah.
there's
Yep. Yep.
there's a word for this. Is there ever a book that you've read that kind of gave you words for something that you had felt but you didn't really know how to say, or maybe made you feel seen in that manner?
Yeah, this is maybe not exactly what you're asking, but
Yeah, yep.
Frederick Buechner's The Sacred Journey shed a light on the kind of he writes the way that I wish I spoke. And I
Yeah,
did not realize, obviously when you're like learning to preach or teach or write, like you're drawing from different sources and you're trying to learn your
yeah,
own voice while also trying to, be coachable and teachable. And I just, for whatever reason, when I first read that book, I remember thinking, this is artistry in preaching. And I had a
yes,
lot of like mechanistic tools, and I'm not knocking any of it. I had I
sure,
had
sure,
rubrics and classes and seminars, and I'm grateful for all of it. His writing felt like, oh, this is preaching put to music almost, and
mm,
it's still very precise and still
yep,
very orthodox and studied. That's it's not a we're throwing out the cerebral wisdom for the sake of
sure, sure,
artistry. But his merging of those two, have long said that I think preaching is both an art and a science, and we
yes,
need both. And often the pendulum can swing very far one way or the other. And there are a couple writers and a couple communicators. I'm like, oh, you're threading the needle in a way that I think is very specific and it's a balance that's very hard to strike. And yeah, he's certainly one of them for me.
absolutely. No, no, I love that. It's a great book. How would you say? How would you say that like I think you kind of answered that, but how did that challenge where you had been, like when it comes to preaching,
Hmm.
versus what change came out of that? Like, how would you say that affected it?
That's a good question. I think was it Peterson again? Did he write Tell It Slant?
Yes,
I
yes, yeah.
think
It took
so.
me a
Even
second,
that
but yeah,
idea of slant.
yep,
And I think in that he's talking about the parables in particular, where like Jesus could have just
yep,
said, "Here's an acronym for how living in the kingdom looks. It's A, B, C,
yes,
and D." But he tells these weird stories, and he's got these like odd riddles, and he gives more questions than he answers. And I think I my knee jerk reaction when I first was writing sermons was, man, how do I convey this fact and truth in a way that like makes the most sense? Which is not a bad
yeah,
goal.
yeah,
But what I was missing for years was, yeah, but you're not helping our people feel anything. You're not helping them
yes,
like imagine a potential future. You're like trying to give them the answers to a Scantron test. And that came from a really good place because I felt like
yeah,
God was showing me something in scripture. I was like, oh, you guys, you got to understand this. And for a certain brain, that's really helpful. For an engineer, that's killer.
yep,
But for a lot of people, they're like, I don't know how I'm supposed to feel. There was no invitation to imagine a different kind of future or a different kind of world, or what
Mm.
would walking in the way of the kingdom, you know what I mean? Like Buechner's kind of writing, and honestly, there's other cats like Brueggemann's prophetic imagination was really profound for me. But guys like Brueggemann and Willard all these guys are so objectively smarter than me.
Yeah, trust me, I feel that. Yes, yeah,
I
yeah.
have to. Sometimes I'm reading the same paragraph 6 times. I'm like, okay, so what are we saying? So I don't want to leave our people doing that either. But there's I don't know, a stirring sometimes to ask questions that I didn't even know that I was already asking, and I think that's a really rare gift. And I feel like we live in an era right now of like sound bites and clickbait and rage baiting,
Yep.
and people are having, arguments in the comment section, and they're calling it a conversation. And I'm like, that's not how any of this works.
Nope.
I'm like longing for something, a little more of a base note, something that resonates at a soul level a little bit more.
Absolutely. I've often thought, because there are similar things to that out there, but I've often thought, how funny would it be to have two actors act out the average Instagram or Facebook argument in the comment section as though it's just a real conversation? Because man,
Funny.
just
That's
talking
funny.
directly past each other, not looking each other in the eyes. Yeah,
That's good, man.
and I suppose we're all guilty in some senses, but man, it's gotten wild to see, that's for sure. So I really appreciate that. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about that's kind of right along those lines, but you talked a lot about like creativity and the church in general, and that's something that to me is huge. I think especially I'm kind of in that millennial, although it's not always fun to admit, but that that generational side of things. And honestly, I think creativity is one of the biggest tools. The reality of beauty and the creativity that we follow in Jesus is just something unmatched by the world. But kind of one of the things I was interested in is, as you see that intersection of faith and creativity, how do you think that helps people? What would be your answer to that? How do you think that helps people see God in fresh ways? Like, how does that work out?
That's great, man. If you go back to the transcendentals of truth, goodness, and beauty, I think the Western church has spent a lot of energy on the first two, truth
Yep.
being kind of the doctrine piece, and
Yep.
goodness being sort of the ethics piece. Very, very important. And beauty in a
Absolutely.
lot of ways has either been forgotten or commodified in my
Yep.
experience, and again, I'm not knocking, I think we need all three.
Sure.
I think
Sure.
where truth seeks to convince, beauty seeks to invite. And I think our culture right now is longing for an invitation posture rather than, and again, this isn't for everybody, and this isn't at all times. I'm not knocking any particular approach or posture or philosophy, but I do think we've seen what the era of like bullhorn on a street corner kind of evangelism has done, when instead it's like, hey, what if you just spent time with our community? What if I invited you to our table? I think beauty has this really, like, true beauty has this way of saying, why in the world would God create a sunset? Like, what is the utilitarian benefit to that?
Yep. Yep.
And it does raise some really interesting existential questions. And I think, I was reading a brain science magazine a couple years ago, and he was talking about our brains are 15 times more likely to latch on to something ugly and negative than they are beautiful, and how we have to work actively really hard against the stream of culture. We see this online. Like, well, yeah, negativity is where the money's at. Like that, of course, that's what we're seeing. You have to work extra hard to, like, what Paul says in Colossians, like, think on such things. He's telling us, here's where your mind should be preoccupied. And that's not to say to ignore brokenness and injustice. We have plenty of scripture that speaks to that too. I just worry sometimes that we're so immersed and so buried in everything that's awful and everything that's terrible that we're missing the goodness of God in the common, ordinary, mundane spaces of our lives,
Absolutely. No, one of the most interesting things that I've done in the past couple of years was like Sabbath, as I said, difficult thing, which sounds ridiculous. I'm so aware of that. My goodness, but it is. But I had that experience where I was reading Heschel, and he had made a comment, and I'm going to butcher it, don't get me wrong, but he had made a comment along the lines of like those who work with their minds ought to Sabbath with their hands. Those who work with their hands Sabbath with their minds.
Right.
And I don't know that I had ever thought of it that way until encountering that, where I was like, and there's still nuance and balance in there. But for me, like going out and tearing up a bunch of rocks in my front yard garden when we lived in Utah, I don't know, man, I could go on that for a minute, but somebody decided we had a grassy hill. It was beautiful. I've seen pictures of our home before we moved in. And someone decided to pour rock landscaping over it and not get rid of the grass. So that was like a nightmare. But moving rocks and working on the weekend, I admittedly sit at this desk most of the time thinking and writing and talking with people. And I had never thought that it qualified in any sense as rest to go do something with my hands. And then, man, doing that, going to the gym, like, again, there is other ways of Sabbath that I think are necessary as well. But for me, that was life-changing to find that rhythm and put that into practice. So one other question I had for you, it's kind of off the beaten path. But one thing that I was kind of interested in is I think that one of the things that, if I can give another compliment, that I know you're just looking for all of them, but another thing I think you guys do really well, and even the church from everything I've seen does really well, is kind of acknowledging that there is kind of this skeptical side of people that's natural and reasonable in some senses. But I think in the world we live in, there's a lot of people who are skeptical of pastors, of the church, of the way that leaders act and that sort of thing. What is one thing, I know there's a big question to throw out, but what's one thing you think would be beneficial for the church to hear? There's a lot of pastors and thinkers who listen to this. And so just kind of like, what's something that would be beneficial to kind of lend to that credibility in a real way?
That's good, man. I would say it like this, at least to pastors and leaders. People will follow your confidence, but they'll be loyal to your vulnerability. I think a lot of preachers in particular are terrified to share honestly, especially from the pulpit, what's actually going on in their head and heart. And that, again, obviously within reason. It makes me cringe a little bit when I hear pastors go in the middle of a sermon, they're like, this is my therapy. And you're like, no, therapy is therapy. This is not, don't do that. That's not. So I'm not saying overshare and, spirit guts on everybody. But I do think, I don't know, man, there's this odd thing in ministry. You're going to get me going now, where a lot of times these like real type A leaders that have, control over everything in the organization. But when it comes to like their church putting them up on a pedestal, all of a sudden they're like, what am I supposed to do? I can't help that they put me on a pedestal. I'm like, you don't take that posture with anything else. Like, we have to actively work against, I like to say, I think stages are occupational hazards for pastors. It is unnatural to stand on a stage with lights and rows of people facing you and a microphone. So you have to actively work against what that's going to do to your ego and your soul.
Absolutely.
Part of that is vulnerability, which does not come naturally for me. The other thing I would say, particularly to leaders, is serve in secret and tell no one. Like this whole like photo op service trend of like, I'm feeding the homeless, but I got to get a selfie while I'm doing it. You're like, just go stack some chairs, go serve at a soup, and then tell no one. And I actually think that helps restore something. If you're only ever doing things in front of a camera or a crowd, that's malforming something at a soul level. And I think to pay attention to that is really, really important.
No, that's huge. And I'm going to share something that hopefully it's not to share for that purpose. This is an ironic time to put that in there, isn't it? But no, I had an experience. So I volunteer as a chaplain, which is a weird thing to do when you're also a Mennonite. But that's a whole different conversation. Volunteer as a chaplain. And it was funny because I've had a few moments now where I've actually thought, I hope no one from church sees this exact moment. And that's not good either. That's been that side of things that I've had to work through as well. Cause I, a couple weeks ago, had to go out on a call, and through a long series of events, I ended up hopping in the back of the cop car. which was my first time, again, homeschooled Christian kid, my first time in the back of a cop car. But with that being said, immediately in my mind, I'm like, oh no, it's a small town. We're about 20,000 people. Someone from church is going to see me in the back of this cop car,
of course,
rolling through town and fill in all the other blanks. But the funny part of it is, like, truthfully, there is, and I know I'm talking about it now on a podcast and all of that, but that's not the point. Like, the reality is there is something that's totally different about being out there volunteering in a sense that has nothing truly to do with my church or with me. Right. I am the tiniest cog in that machine of just kind of sitting there when something bad has happened.
That's right.
And I don't know, I've appreciated, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I've appreciated that when I go volunteer in those senses, in those quiet moments, I am usually the least qualified, least helpful person in that room, which often is just true in general. But you kind of have that lie you tell yourself when you're a pastor. You're like, oh, I know what I'm doing. When you're out there and you're sitting with somebody whose child has just died, you are effectively useless. And it's been really healing, I think, for me to sit in those moments and think I don't have to have the right words to say because there aren't any here. And so I think that's a huge thing that, I don't know that I've heard anybody say that so succinctly, but I think that's absolutely something the church leaders, pastors need to embrace that for sure. And so jumping that hard left turn back into books, but jumping into that, there is one that I ask every episode. I think it's a fun question to get into. So I'll preface it. This is every Christian, not every person, because every person, sure, we could say, oh, we want every person in America to have a Bible, every person in the world, whatever. They probably do. They have YouVersion. But with that being said, if there was one book you could put in the hands of every Christian, what would that book be? Yeah, it's a big one.
I mean, I have an Apple Notes open here, and I've narrowed it down to 37 is what I have right here. 37 books.
List them off.
I'm not going to do that to you. Honestly, the one that my gut says is Henry Nouwen's Life of the Beloved. He talks about, particularly for Christians and Christian leaders, that the greatest task of the follower of Jesus is to always live from a place of belovedness. And he gets into it in so many different ways on how out of whack everything gets when we forget our belovedness in Jesus. When we, he talks about the 3 lies of I am what I have, I am what I do, I am what other people say about me. I see those 3 lies every single week in pastoral ministry from people who've made hundreds of millions of dollars and people who just got kicked out of their apartment and everything in between. This like living out of some shadow version of some script that we were given or that we've been telling ourselves. Honestly, I'm rambling, sorry, but like living out of a place of belovedness, of security, and not just like, oh, I get to go to heaven when I die. That's part of it, but that God both loves and likes me is for some reason a much harder pill for people to swallow. It is I think it is honestly one of the hardest things in theology to actually believe that you are the beloved in Christ. And I don't know, man, you and I probably could both swap stories of pastors and leaders who, torpedoed their life because somewhere along the way they believed that they were the sum of their accomplishments or their failures, or that it always had to be up and to the right, or they were carrying some crippling shame. I just see it again and again and again, and I'm like, man, Life of the Beloved. And he's got a bunch of other works, The Way of the Heart and some other things that speak to the same kind of idea. But that, for me, at least in kind of this cultural moment, I keep coming back to that book.
Oh, absolutely. It's an incredible book. There's that reality that I think I shared this a while back on the show, but I was in a room full of pastors not too long ago, pastoral meeting thing, and somebody asked who struggles with pride, and I raised my hand because I'm a pastor. So I raised my hand and no one else did. And I remember the conversation. I was like, hey, your greatest fear is you raise your hand for one of those things and no one else does. Right. Like, come on, guys, you let me down. Terrible. But secondarily, and more importantly, I remember thinking like, the clicking moment for me was no one, in my honest opinion, is no one who gets on stage as I do every single Sunday and preaches most of the Sundays out of a year
Yeah.
somewhere and thinks that they have something that they've worked on, they've crafted, and they've done it so well that they need to share it with between 40 and 4,000 people. Doesn't matter. No one who is in that circumstance with the lights on the stage doesn't struggle with pride at some point in time. We
Sure,
just have to
sure,
be honest. It
sure.
doesn't mean you're evil or wrong.
Right.
But I think there is that reality of like remembering or discovering, even sadly for the first time for many pastors I've met, that you are actually loved and liked by God. That does wonders to that pride side of things. You don't have to prove something every Sunday
That's right.
anymore. You're just sharing this story that's been given to you. And I think that's huge. I grew up in a very, very reformed household.
Yeah,
Nothing wrong with that. Just it was a
sure.
different way of growing up. And one of the things that blew my mind was when somebody gave me that book, and I was like, again, no shade on my reformed brothers, but no one had told me that before. I think the way
Oh,
I
man.
grew up was like, God hates you because you're a dirty, rotten sinner.
Yeah.
And fair, I am, but
Sure.
but he also loves me, and there's something huge in that,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that I think we need to grasp. I think that's a huge one. So thank you for that.
Man, you're welcome.
What would you say? I think you kind of answered like what that conversation would look like, but if we're giving it to every single Christian, what conversation do you think that would start, or do you hope that would start within congregations?
Man, my hope, I shared this a couple of Sundays ago, actually. One of the things that keeps me up at night as a pastor is that not nearly enough of us are living as free as we actually are. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
I genuinely think there are thousands, if not millions of people who prayed a prayer and I believe will be in heaven and have surrendered to Jesus and are still living with the same shackles, with the same uh,
Absolutely.
necessary weight. I live in the Bible Belt now, so it's a different planet what I'm used to, and I feel like I see even more of that. You're like, man, you know all the verses, you have all the
Yep.
cultural Christianity in spades, and yet, man, you're carrying a weight of shame or disqualification or identity fraud or imposter syndrome. I've had that
Yeah.
most of my life. I think at the very least a book like that I hope would begin to invite the conversation. Man, where have I believed other scripts or other lies that actually aren't true of me in Jesus at all? And hopefully that leads to a path of some kind of vulnerability and healing, in a community of believers. I think part of what Now and does really well too is to remind us of how significant a gospel community is. I meet a
Yes.
lot of I feel like
Yep.
it's really hip right now to talk about kind of an isolated Christianity. And I'll say, like, man, I think you think you're sounding all big and tough right now. I'm telling you, this is not a path to flourishing. That's not to say
Yep.
there aren't times for a silence retreat or to go off
Sure.
by
Sure.
yourself. Jesus is regularly withdrawing, but God himself is community, Father, Son, and Spirit.
Yep.
We're made in the image and likeness of a God who is relationship. So why would we think that we can grow in Christ likeness apart from that? I just think that's why we need to reclaim even things like confession. Protestants have kind of made confession a dirty
Yep.
word. Like, well, I
Yep.
don't go to a priest. I don't have to. I'm like, I understand that. But James talks about there's a healing that takes place
Yep.
when you actually speak. Here's what I really, really screwed up. And someone says back to you, in Christ, you're forgiven.
Yeah.
There's something neurochemically and also at a soul level that I think we're robbing ourselves of by like trying to do
Totally.
everything in me and my own strength. And I'll go to church diligently and I'll read my Bible and then I'm gonna shove everything else just deep down into my soul. I
Yep.
uh I think now one would in a lot of ways kind of pull back the layers of some of those tendencies.
Absolutely. No, the two things that I think, and this is just Pastor Matt's perspective, but the two things I think the church has completely seemingly forgotten about, Protestant church,
Hmm.
is confession, not again that they have to come into my office and talk with me, but to confess to your brothers and sisters, these are things. I think there's huge benefit in that. And then foot washing is one I've talked a bunch about that I'm like, man, you want to see a room of uncomfortable people, try foot washing in church. It is wild. But I will say there's something beautiful about that I almost wish it had made it into the practices of the church as not necessarily an ordinance, but somewhere in there where like it feels like this weird story that maybe if you're going to a Christian camp, you get to wash people's feet once or twice and you're like, this is weird and I don't like it. But the humility that you enter into the conversation when you have to have your feet washed, I don't like it. But it's needed. Man, it's something. At least spiritual foot washing. Come clean to people. Maybe I don't know. Maybe that's too much. But so the questions that I got for you to kind of wrap things up, I've got two in particular. Okay. The first one is: are there any books that you are reading right now that you're excited about? Anything that you think? You'd love to share.
Totally. How Christian do they have to be? Is that
absolutely none? 0 to 100, totally up to you.
That's great. It kind of runs the gamut right now. I just finished Win Collier's "A Burning in My Bones," the biography of Eugene Peterson. That was I'm embarrassed that I waited that long. No. But I also just finished Matthew McConaughey's Green Lights.
I've heard a couple people talk about that.
The audiobook, again, disclaimer, not a Christian book. There's some rough language. There's rough everything. It's McConaughey.
Yep.
But it is wild, man. It is all over the place.
Does he read the audiobook?
He does, dude.
Oh, well, that makes it worth it in itself.
And he's closer and further from the microphone, and he's shouting at some parts, and it is wild.
Oh, that's awesome.
But I also we're both communicators. So I'm a nerd when it comes to that stuff. Erwin McManus wrote a book called the Seven Frequencies of Communication, which felt like such hippie dust to me, but a really trusted mentor recommended it, and I'm like, well,
sure,
I trust you, I guess. And it was quite good. I was pleasantly surprised. So I'm trying to get better at not only reading stuffy theological books. Whether it's a biography, an autobiography, or something about communication. I'm trying to, unsuccessfully, by the way. There's so many good stuffy theological books. It's hard for me to zoom out a little bit and remember, hey, remember Harold and the Purple Crayon? Remember how much that resonated with your soul? You need some of that in your life. So I didn't mention Wendell Berry, but Wendell Berry is up there for me, and he's got a collection of his Sabbath poems. I'm not like a sit and read poetry kind of guy. But I want to be. So sometimes I'll just force myself. I'm like, I'm going to read a couple entries here, and that's been good for my soul.
Oh, easily the most. This is probably the most embarrassing thing I've ever said on a recording, but I can't tell you how many times I've thought I want my kids to grow up, and I don't think I've ever said this out loud, but I want my kids to grow up and remember dad reading Wendell Berry, remember dad reading these things. Absolutely. But then I think about it for about 2 seconds and I'm like, they're probably not. They're going to grow up and remember whatever else.
There's no way. No way, man.
and that's A-okay.
On their arm, they're not going to remember it. No way.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that's okay. That's all good. But I think it's a fun one. No, I started reading the Brothers Karamazov, which I had read before, but not really. I think I audibled it or something years ago. And coming back to it and actually physically reading, I was like, man, this is so good. And then there's 4 friends that came out with books in the past month. And I'm like, well, I got to read these. Can't, you got to read Slow Theology, the new Swoboda and Gupta book. Yep. Oh my goodness. The book's incredible, but it has distracted me from reading the other books. So I got to get back to it one of these days.
I believe it.
It's on the table. So I appreciate it. So no, I think that's awesome. One last kind of big question, and then we'll kind of wrap things up. And I don't think this one's too crazy, but what's one practice or rhythm that has been shaping your walk with Jesus recently? Just kind of personally, doesn't have to be a ministry thing, but what's something that you've kind of set aside just to kind of take care of of yourself. It's hard as a pastor. I get that.
Yeah.
But
That's a great question, man. It's a small thing, but I have, so I have little kids, 7, 6,
yeah.
and 3. And I realized, especially post-COVID, something I was doing was I was working all the way up to the moment I pulled into my driveway, and then I was
Yep.
dragging all of that stress into my time with them. If that
Yeah.
last phone call was heavy or aggravating or whatever.
Yep.
And so it's such a small thing, man, but it's been really helpful is I actually wrote a bit of a driveway liturgy for myself
Yeah.
that I pray, and then I just power my phone off entirely until my boys are asleep.
Oh, that's
Which is
awesome.
it's not that they go to bed, they're still so young, so
Yeah.
it's
Yep.
really only about 2 hours,
Yep.
but I was realizing that even if my phone was on somewhere else, I was, like, tempted to check it, I was tempted to, like,
Yep.
respond to a quick email, and so just that commitment to them, like, I'm
Yeah.
gonna get my heart and head right before I enter my home, I'm gonna
Mhm.
power it off entirely, and then I'm just gonna be present with my family for 90 minutes, for 2
Yep.
hours, and that as a daily rhythm it's great because, like, our staff knows, like, "Hey, you can't get a hold of Ian during this window
Yep.
and this window." Like, it's just not a thing, sorry.
Yep.
And, having that just kinda built in is not I don't wanna oversell it and make it sound
No,
like, "Oh,
no,
if you
no.
do this, it'll change your life," but it
Yep.
has been really, really formative in this season of our family, for sure.
No, that's awesome. I might have to take that advice. My kids they're 8, 6, and 4, so right in the
You're right
same
there, right
same
there.
range. And thank goodness we still go to bed at 7 o'clock. So I'll
Hold
take
on to
that
that as
all
long
day
as you can,
long.
man.
Yeah, yeah, it's slipping away quickly.
Uh-huh.
But
Yep.
we're at least with my oldest. He's like, "Hey, I'm not actually tired," and I was like, "Yeah." You also wake up at 4:30 in the morning, so like,
Right.
make it make sense. How are you not tired?
No
But I
kidding.
appreciate it, dude. No, thank you so much. Well, I really, really genuinely appreciate you being on here, taking some time out of your day to jump in here. So the last thing I've got for you is just, is there any way that people can connect with you, where to follow up with you, your church, all of that? Anything
Oh,
you wanted to
sure.
plug?
Yeah, the church website is bridge.tv. And if you go to the staff page, whatever, and click my little dumb, our staff photos are actually GIFs, which is
Yep.
something that I'm very
It
happy.
was pretty cool.
Our
I didn't
creative
know
team,
that
they get
until
all
this
credit for
week.
that. Oh man, our creative team is the best, man. I'm so proud of them. But they can, you can email me directly if you want. I'm on Instagram at Ian Simkins. And then, yeah, that might be iansimkins.com is technically there. Is where you mentioned that list of like favorite authors or whatever.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
about all that's on that website though. There's not really much else there. So
Hey, that's not a bad thing.
I
But if you do
appreciate it.
want to see an incredible GIF of Ian having, I think they're little balls from a ball pit. Is that what was being thrown
Yeah,
at you
yeah, yep.
in your GIF? Yeah, that was a fun surprise. I went through that trying to find the email, and I was like, oh, hey, look at this. Man, that's fun. I like it. My photo is just dumb me standing on a stage. I gotta update our website. That's way cooler.
That's
So
all right. Hop on the GIF
I
bandwagon, man.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll have to. Can I steal your aesthetic for gifts for no, I appreciate it, man.
Permission granted. Yeah.
Hey, appreciate it. Appreciate it. Well, thank you so much for your time, dude. I really am grateful for all that you do and all of your ministry out there. And
Thanks, man.
one of these days we'll come out to Tennessee and get to hang out for a little bit, but not yet. But anyhow,
Hey, we love that, man.
appreciate
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
appreciate you guys, man. Yeah, of course. Thank you. Thank you.